The Senate Judiciary Committee held its 10th hearing today to discuss gun violence in America.
That's right. Today's focus, mass shootings and the widespread access to high-capacity assault-style weapons. Lawmakers discussed ways to prevent mass shootings like the one we saw at a 4th of July parade in Highland Park, Illinois. 7 people were killed when a gunman opened fire from a rooftop, dozens more injured. Highland Park Mayor Nancy Rotering spoke at today's hearing, reiterating what happened in her town has become all too common.
Less than a minute is all it took for a person with an assault weapon to shoot 83 rounds into a crowd, forever changing so many lives. And the most disturbing part, this is the norm in our country. Highland Park had the uniquely American experience of a 4th of July parade turn into what has now become a uniquely American experience of a mass shooting.
Joining us with more is Distinguished Service Professor at SUNY Cortland, Robert Spitzer. Robert, welcome. Mayor Rotering just pointed out the number of mass shootings in this country is uniquely American, in her words, and other developed nations don't see nearly as many mass shootings. What do you think lawmakers need to do to get on top of this issue of gun violence in America? And what is it that's preventing lawmakers from acting?
Well, first point to make, mass shootings are a multifaceted problem. Second point is there is increasing information about not only who these people are and who is likely to commit mass shootings, but also to develop strategies to try and thwart them. Obviously, you can't have a mass shooting without a gun. And the gun is at the epicenter of mass shootings by definition. And Congress, of course, acted last month, and President Biden signed the first new significant gun bill passed by Congress in nearly 30 years. And it took some steps in that piece of legislation to get at some elements of this larger problem. But there is much more to do, needless to say. It doesn't necessarily all have to run through Congress. States have the ability to act as well, but there's much that can be done, to be sure. A few steps have been taken, such as encouraging the states to adopt red flag laws. Mm-hmm. That's one step that could be helpful in thwarting at least some mass shootings.
Now, there are other steps, larger steps, that are also being discussed. Committee Chair Illinois Senator Dick Durbin wants a nationwide ban on the sale, import, and manufacturing of certain semi-automatic weapons. And Robert, given the number of guns on the market and the fact that people already own many of these guns, do you think this will realistically help solve the problem? And there are so many guns out there already. So, how could it be enforced, and what happens to all those guns that are there?
Well, the gun that is most frequently used in mass shootings is a handgun, not a long gun or an assault rifle. On the other hand, assault weapons are disproportionately likely to be used in mass shootings, and their use in mass shootings has been increasing, and it's also true that assault weapons are more lethal. They're more likely to produce injuries and deaths even than other firearms. There's a particular part to this puzzle that is noteworthy, which is specifically large capacity ammunition magazines. And that is something that could be regulated aside and apart from assault weapons. Remember, we did have an assault weapons ban in place at the federal level, a limited ban from 1994 to 2004. That law lapsed at 2004 and has not been renewed by Congress. The House of Representatives is considering a new assault weapons ban right now. But that older law, federal law, also included a limit on high-capacity magazines defined as those holding more than 10 rounds. And that by itself is a measure that could be significantly helpful for a variety of reasons that aren't too hard to figure out. But that would be one specific gun measure that is limiting large-capacity magazines that could be disproportionately helpful in stemming the lethality of these shootings.
All right. Well, Robert Spitzer, we thank you so much for your time and for your insight into this issue.